the interesting thing about the history of browsers is that every, let's say 7 or 8 years or something, the whole space gets majorly disrupted. Chrome did not win through distribution advantage. It won by being the better product.
Say 5 years down the line, Strawberry is the browser everyone uses, like the market leader and so on. What does Strawberry look like at that point of time? We're entering an era where AI systems aren't just answering questions, they're completing end-to-end tasks that follow a predictable structure. These systems are called AI agents, and at a high level, they follow a simple three-step procedure. They receive a goal, they create a plan in a way such that they can achieve that goal, and then finally they take actions, of course, while checking in with the end user in case any inputs are needed. In many ways, this is like having your own virtual assistant that can actually get stuff done. Now, think about where we spend most of our times online. It's like booking flights, booking concert tickets, researching for work, scheduling emails, sending outreach emails. The web browser is basically the place where we do all of these tasks and more. And that is the perfect playground for these autonomous little AI agents to do their individual tasks. But here's the problem. The browsers of today, they were designed for humans. They're not designed for agents. They've got tabs and forms and bookmarks and vignettes and ads, and they're all very clunky and inefficient when it comes to getting some real work done. So that's where Strawberry comes in. Now, in this episode, we're speaking to Sebastian, who is the co-founder of Strawberry Browser. This is an AI-first browser. Built-in assistants can carry out tasks with you on the website. So you can actually now focus on stuff that matters to you, whether that's watching a YouTube video, playing a game, just basically writing any creative thoughts that you have, while your AI agents on the side can do the mundane tasks that you always wanted to automate. Now, Strawberry was recently ranked as product number 1 on the Product Hunt as like the product of the day. Also, it was ranked as number 1 as product of the week. Now, with all the movement happening in the AI world with OpenAI and Perplexity publicly announcing that they're either building a web browser or they're in the market to acquire one, this might just be what the future of web browsers for this AI agent first world looks like. So I'm very excited to dive in and talk to Sebastian to see what is the future of web browsers. Sebastian, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for taking time out for this. I'm really excited to learn about what is the future of the browser.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's going to be fun.
Yeah. All right. So let's just dive straight into what is the problem. I mean, like browsers have been there for such a long while, right? But yeah, where do you see this, I don't know, this gap in the market that we now really need a new browser? So can you just talk to me a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I would say that there's kind of two ways to approach this, right? Kind of one from the, let's say, problem perspective and one from an opportunity perspective. So the problem perspective, I would say just the fact that we spend so much time in our browsers doing grunt work and doing repetitive tasks, that really, if you would ask most people, they would wish that some of their work would be automated. But a lot of the time, there's not going to be any good tool to do that. So that's kind of the general problem, and really something we take for granted. I think, like the fact that just like some things you just have to do, and we just kind of like suck it up and do it. So that's one thing we want to challenge. And then kind of from the market and opportunity perspective, I would just say that the rise of agents changes everything and changes all the basic premises that the browser was built on to begin with, right? Like the initial browser, like 30 years ago, was built on a completely different idea than this kind of dynamic agent-to-agent communication version of the internet that we think that we're going to see moving forward.
Yeah. And just kind of like touching a little bit on that, right? Like when you say agent, I think one thing which I'm seeing is like, what is the definition of agent, right? Like, and there are like thought leaders who kind of like come up with like really fancy definitions. But I mean, extremely simply put, what is your version? Like when Sebastian thinks of like, you know what, this is a swarm of AI agents acting autonomously and like all more fancy words. What does that even mean?
You know, I think I kind of almost humanize it a little bit in my head.
Yeah.
Like I kind of think of it as an intern. So as soon as a computer system can do something that an intern would have been able to do, that the traditional software wouldn't be able to do, I would call that an agent probably.
Right. And just kind of like probably going a little bit more into that. The way you think about that is, and what do you mean? Essentially, when we look at like standard operating procedures in terms of tasks, There have been systems in the past, and like which we still use, like say IFTTTs and whatnot, which have been doing things like, oh, if I receive an email from email ID blah, make sure you send a follow-up email which has this very content, right? And then these are the wildcard tokens which you could replace and so on. Where is that delta between, say, an automation to what is an agent? And in my mind, obviously, there is a little bit of like, okay, now there are probabilistic systems which kind of tell you, okay, there's a layer of like, okay, here's the deterministic task ends, and like you could probably go in several different directions. But is that what you think, or is there like a more refined way you were thinking about it?
Yeah, it's a little bit of a gray area. I think the simple answer would say that anytime there's some level of like runtime decision making that isn't defined by predetermined rules, I think then we're starting to get into kind of the agentic sphere. But I think the key word there is agentic rather than agent as a binary thing, right? Because obviously there are different degrees.
Yeah, fair point. Okay, so now, of course, you've got this incredible browser which you launched on Product Hunt. It's been a hit, product of the day, product of the week. Congratulations, first of all, for all of that.
Thank you.
Yeah, so what do you think is like wildly different in the way Strawberry as a browser works versus, say, traditional Chrome, Edge, so on?
So, really, since the launch of GPT 3.5, we've seen like more and more like really powerful agentic systems pop up, agentic capabilities. And most notably, we've seen that in the software development world, like with tools like Cursor or Copilot or Windsurf. And as a developer, you kind of really notice that there's been a dramatic shift in how a lot of software engineers work on a daily basis. We haven't really seen that in the non-technical sphere. It's been kind of like, oh, I'm writing better emails, or not even like faster emails, or not even better, like through ChatGPT or whatever. So, and we just kind of asked ourselves the question, like, if we take kind of the cutting edge agentic capabilities that we've seen in the software world and kind of put that into the context of the browser, how would that look? And so that's what we did. So we just kind of took, I would say, two basic categories of agentic capabilities. One would be research, and one would be actions. And there are other agentic research tools out there, right? Like kind of these deep research tools. But the difference with being in the browser is that you have all of the context of the human that the agent is serving. So, for example, you're already signed in to services like LinkedIn or Twitter or Reddit, or if you have a Washington Post subscription or whatever. And so we've given the agent capabilities to open tabs just like a human would to kind of be able to access that information.
Yeah. When you say agentic versus research, or like action versus research rather, right? What is your definition of like the differentiation in the two, essentially?
Yeah, I would say I think of it as read and write access. So anytime you actively need a cursor to interact with an element on the page, that's going to kind of be the interaction part. But if it's enough with just kind of extracting the text information or visual data from a page without actually changing anything on it, well, that's just going to be read access.
Right. Okay. So I think one question, which probably I'm sure you guys have answered many times by now, but all the things that you said, which is basically say the way I see this is like 1:n sort of a relationship, right? Like where one is the user on one end. Let's say I'm the user of Strawberry browser or Chrome browser, whatever it is. And then there are like n different systems that I interact with, whether that's LinkedIn and booking.com and hotels.com and you name it, right? Now, and then of course, like you consolidate all of that and then you take an action as an agent, or there's probably a middle layer which has the agentic capabilities to talk to each of these systems, right? What if tomorrow ChatGPT or any of those systems says, hey, you know what? Just sign into your LinkedIn, sign into your Washington Post, so on and so forth, and then just talk to me in the ChatGPT window, and we can do everything. You don't need a net new browser. How do you feel about that? And did you guys consider that as an approach instead of making a browser? What were the pros, cons? How did you guys just think about it?
So I like to think of it from a similar perspective of kind of the cursor versus Devin dilemma.
Yeah.
Right. So the original Devin idea was like we abstract away the entire software engineer, everything is in the cloud, and you just kind of send your natural language instructions, just like you would any colleague who's working remotely. And Cursor's approach was, hey, let's take the capabilities that exist today to kind of supercharge the person where they already work in an environment where that they're used to, so that they don't need to relearn. and anything. And I would say that there are a few benefits to the cursor approach here, right? One, of course, being the fact that there's a familiarity to it. It's much more, as someone who's used to software development and has done kind of the same thing for a long time. This is like this magical kind of 10x moment, and it's super relatable. While if you have it in the cloud, it's just kind of like, hey, this is a competitor to me. Like this is like they're trying to replace me, and it's kind of a different dynamic at play there. So that's number one. And then number two is also just the technical capabilities where we are right now, right? So you could say that like, hey, we're going to try and build this like AGI in the cloud thing, and we're not going to launch anything until we're ready for AGI. Or you could say, hey, let's launch a product and kind of iterate based on that, which I think by now is kind of the conventional wisdom in startups anyway. So that's kind of why we took that approach.
No, makes sense. So from the many use cases that Strawberry has, right? Which one do you think is like something which blows your mind, or you're like, you know what, like I just love that Strawberry could do this?
So so there's kind of like two categories there, right? It's like one is like what is mind blowing and what is like really really helpful, which are not necessarily the same thing.
Absolutely.
So the most time saving task is often like opening hundreds of tabs, taking out like structured data and putting that into a sheet. I've been surprised by how many jobs that's like where that is like one of the main thing that you do like 50% of your time or something. So the comments that we get that are like, you're saving me like tens of hours per week, those are often related to that category of task. They kind of take information, maybe even augment it somehow with extra research, and then kind of move that or store it somewhere. But then the ones that are kind of blowing my mind are more kind of like interaction stuff. Because it's so. It might be because it's like there's not a lot of great real life examples yet of products that are doing that really really well. So when I see people kind of use that kind of rights capability, the interaction capability to automate a real task that they do often, like going into like an internal dashboard and extracting a graph or something and then sending that to a colleague via Slack, like that sort of stuff. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think I completely agree with you. One of the things which I've hated about the evolution of the web is essentially, like these consent bumps, and then of course like the vignettes which come and all of that, right? So sometimes like, I just need like a simple answers to like, I don't know, what's the nutritional value of this almond that was sourced from this place? But then you have to hear about the life story of the human being, see two pop-ups, get a 20% discount code, only to figure out like, oh, you know what, it doesn't really have anything. So I think that's something which personally I believe would be like, oh wow, such a boon,
And I even think that I think there are a lot of those kind of annoying tasks or annoying kind of behaviors on the web that we've just kind of at this point just kind of accepted, and we don't even realize that they're like as like a thorn in our sides, But I think kind of like we kind of strive to build a product that like you don't realize the value of it until you've gone back to what you had before. Like that's kind of the ultimate goal for me, at least. It's kind of like that. I think that's a great sign for an amazing product.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so in terms of like building this product, but what is like the boldest bet that you guys have taken? Like everybody, like conventional wisdom would probably say, you should do this, but then you're like, no, this is a bet that we must take, and that's probably paid off, or maybe not, right? Like, what is that?
Building a browser. I think that's the big one. People really warned us about this. And kind of said like, don't do it. It's not a good idea. You're going to go ahead. You're going to go against Google and Microsoft and Apple and all these giants. And I think we just had this kind of almost naive optimism about it. So that was one part. But also we actually thought a lot about this. We actually also thought about the prospect of creating a Chrome extension instead and kind of bringing AI, because that's the same thing, kind of, right? You bring AI capabilities into where people are working today. But after both a lot of gut feeling and quite a lot of like analysis, we just kind of felt like it was the best move to build our own browser.
And you guys didn't want to take a step approach of like start with an extension and then kind of shoot out from there, sort of thing?
We considered it. We felt that there were a lot of benefits to going on the browser straight away. largely because of the rate of change as well. So we felt like there's kind of like, you kind of want to be able to position yourself within the browser space as quickly as possible, because it is already a crowded space and it will become even more crowded.
Yeah.
And also, you can just build better stuff as well. You have more control over the actual product. And we built our product to be recognizable right now, right? So that if you come from Chrome, for example, you won't be disoriented.
Yeah.
But despite that, we believe very deeply that the browser in just a few months or maybe years, the browser as a product category is going to look radically different than what we're used to.
Yeah. I think also the word browser might just become a floppy disk-ish thing, right? Like it's like the save button is basically floppy disk, which nobody recognizes today.
Yeah.
The browser might just be that word wherein it is nothing but an agentic workspace, for what it's worth, right? So I do believe in the same future as well. That's great. Okay, so you've of course spoken about why you wanted to build a browser. That's great. Myself included, and I'm sure that's true for many people, I don't think I particularly understand how does even one build a browser, right? Like people know today is like, oh, I can spin off a web app and like a mobile app and like all those sort of things. But what is a browser and how do you even build one, right?
Yeah. So you can kind of choose your level of difficulty here.
Sure.
So you can choose to kind of go for the final boss right away, which would, well, okay, the final boss would be to build kind of like everything from scratch, like the rendering engine and JavaScript engine and stuff.
You didn't talk about microchips and stuff, sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. So we didn't want to go down that route quite yet.
Sure.
But yeah, we actually chose to start as simple as possible. So we actually started building on top of Electron, which is a JavaScript framework that is like an abstraction on top of Chromium, right? So Chromium, of course, is open source, Electron as well. And Electron is traditionally made to be able to build, to build a native app using web technologies. But since it's built on top of Chromium, we were able to kind of twist it a bit to be able to get a browser out of it.
Right. And in terms of like, say, the architecture layers, right? Like, so it's Chromium, Electron on top of it. Now you're using LLMs, not sure if that's OpenAI or like a gamut of other ones, right? How does that stack up in this whole architecture?
Like where do the LLMs?
Where do the LLMs sit? Yeah.
So currently it's kind of separated processes, right? So you still have pretty much a traditional browser under the hood in a lot of ways. And if we wanted to start tinkering with that, I think that would be a huge task, which likely at some point will become relevant. Right now, we're doing everything we can to kind of try to get quick wins with minimal technical investment.
Yeah. That's a very smart approach. I've seen a lot of people just basically go down the rabbit hole of like, you know what, I'm just going to create everything from scratch. Yeah,
we're trying to be super focused on like practical use cases, like actual time-saving, real tasks that people are doing on a daily basis. Like one key success metric for us is like how many hours per week can we save our users? Because it becomes so tangible, the value of the product. And if you start in that end and then kind of build a technology based on that, I think that's a good approach.
I agree. I think the question though is like mostly, and I've dealt with like a few things where like people talk about efficiency, but then that's all like self-reported. So is that what you're relying on primarily, or is there a more scientific way how you're actually calculating how much time has been saved?
So currently we're doing it more in terms of like qualitative user interviews.
Sure.
And I think there are definitely times where people say that, okay, this is not saving me a lot of time. And that's kind of a clue for us where not to go in a way, right? So we listen to the ones that say, hey, these are the areas where I'm saving time. And then the people who say this is not saving me time, and that kind of informs what use cases are the low hanging fruit.
Got it. Okay, so I think a big elephant in the room, mammoth in the room always is distribution, right? And as you rightly put it, like this market is crowded with the behemoths of big tech, right? Like there's Google Chrome, there's Microsoft Edge. I don't know if Internet Explorer still is there, whatever, right? There's Firefox, you name it. Like there's a bunch of those, right? And then I think Perplexity has already said that they're gonna build a browser. Whatever. I think the real question that I have is like, in many of these browsers, which often come pre-installed on devices like say Safari and Apple and so on, how do you create a wedge in the market? It's like, okay, you know what? Like, this is how we're gonna enter, and this is our niche, and this is where we play, and like expand from there. Like, what's your distribution strategy?
Yeah. So the interesting thing about kind of the history of browsers is that every, like, let's say 7 or 8 years or something, the whole space gets majorly disrupted. So we kind of went from Netscape being the obvious market leader to Microsoft with Internet Explorer to Google with Chrome. And I think the interesting switch from Explorer to Chrome is that Chrome did not win through distribution advantage. It won by being the better product. And we are kind of taking for granted that the space is going to be majorly disrupted. Like, even if we're not in it, right? Something's going to happen here. And the big players are going to lose market share because they're not going to be able to execute on this quickly enough. Again, because of the rapidly changing landscape and the expectations from users. And so at the end of the day, it's going to be up to the new players to figure out how to execute best on it. But what I'm trying to get at is that I think ultimately it's going to be about the better product.
Got it. And other than Product Hunt, are there places where you're actively getting users from? Or is it just like Product Hunt is like the centerpiece through which a lot of like word of mouth has happened?
So a lot of word of mouth happens through just general reporting and people writing in newsletters and stuff like that. We're still in pre-beta, so we have a wait list and we're still closed. So we've kind of chosen to only bring on a certain amount of users to be able to iterate with those who have the clearest use cases. To be able to really focus on product and reliability and stability, and then later on focus more on the growth aspect of things.
Got it. Okay, so then, I mean, we've of course spoke a little bit about like the future of the browser might just be completely different to like what it looks like today, right? But what is your version or what's your vision? You know, like say, I'm gonna put 5 years, right? Like say 5 years down the line, Strawberry is like the browser everyone uses, like the market leader and so on, right? What does Strawberry look like at that point of time?
So I think what the browser looks like is a kind of a downstream effect of the environment that it's supposed to serve, which is the internet. So the future of the internet, our thesis here is that it's going to evolve into this more dynamic landscape of millions or billions of AI agents that are hyper specialized, who are performing tasks on your behalf and serving humans. And we don't know quite yet how that's going to play out, and we don't know the kind of UI UX requirements for that to work. So I want to be careful with having too much of a clear vision of exactly I wouldn't be able to draw on paper for you like what is going to be the UX of Strawberry browser. What I can tell you is that we're going to try to kind of accommodate that new landscape as well as possible, and also try to be at the forefront of it as it is evolving.
Got it. So I think, but then your biggest hypothesis in this is the interactions over the internet are currently done by human, will be through n number of agents, and the workspace for these agents needs to be Strawberry. Now, how does the interface evolve for that human to agent interaction might just evolve, and that, of course, these details will follow. But then that's the vision that you see. Like, what is that layer which joins a billion agents and that divergence into a human interaction, right?
Exactly, yes. And how do we make sure that we keep the human kind of in the center of that, and make sure that all the different agents that still live in these different containers, that they have the right context for what they're doing, right? In the same way that colleagues might need to communicate with each other to be able to perform their tasks well. They can't live in isolation. So there's going to be this kind of communication net. And I think there's a huge role for the browser to play there, to be kind of the layer between the human and the agents.
Fair point. All right. So I think one thing which really fascinates me with, like, say, startups is just the velocity with which people are able to ship things. It's like, oh, you think of something and tomorrow it's live and day after it's evolved and so on, right? So how are you guys, and first of all, I think maybe how big is the team today? How are you evolving this team? What are some pragmatic approaches you're taking to like make sure that the culture is right and the building is still fast and all of that?
Yeah, I love that question. We are currently four people. We're all technical. We are growing the team, but are doing it very deliberately. And kind of the pillars of what we think is really, really important has more to do with personality than actual experience or capabilities, right? So one example that we think is super important is low ego. So the ability to have like good faith going into a discussion, really being curious about trying to find the best solution to a problem, and recognizing when you're wrong. That's something that we've that has connected us, like the original team, very strongly, and something we want to try to keep as much as possible as we scale. Another one is an 80-20 approach, so quick execution, and not, again, like not kind of putting your ego too much into let's say the quality of the code, and more just kind of think like, okay, does it work right now? Then yes, then we can go back and fix it later on. But right now we need to execute.
Yeah, fair point. Okay, I think that brings us to the end of today's conversation, Sebastian. This was so helpful and very educative for me personally. Thank you so much, man. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thanks for having me. It was awesome.